Acadiana, I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy midweek to you. Hopefully you're having a great week so far. Very, very hot outside once again as a heat advisory is in effect for most of Acadiana today. Last check of the temperature, looks like we're running right at about 96 degrees here in Lafayette, and that dew point has dropped off to 71, so the heat index only at about 104 degrees, which by South Louisiana standards really isn't that bad, especially when you get those dew points to drop off a little bit more. And before we get into the tropical stuff, I just wanted to show you this morning's sounding and how much dry air there was aloft, and I think that some of this dry air here that's in the mid-levels of the atmosphere is starting to work its way down toward the surface. So that's why we're seeing some of the dew points kind of dropping off, and therefore half of Acadiana is actually not under a heat advisory, as we think those heat index values will be staying below 108, but the eastern half of Acadiana will be seeing those heat index values topping out somewhere between 108 and 111, so a heat advisory will be in effect. But just kind of a look at the sounding. Again, the red line is the temperature going upward toward the top of the atmosphere. The green line is the dew point, and the farther apart those two lines are, the drier the air mass is. So I'm thinking some of that dry air is working its way down to the surface, which actually helps us out a little bit, even though those temperatures have been running in the upper 90s. And I still think we're going to hit 101 for the daytime high. And looking outside, you can see there's a lot of sunshine out there. Also wanted to point out, if anybody's thinking about heading over toward Baton Rouge, if you look at the Butte LaRose camera there in the bottom left, there is a truck that's blocking the roadway. That's the eastbound lanes there, right around the Welcome Center at the Butte LaRose exit. And if you look at the bottom right corner, that's Henderson. So you can see it's already backed up in that direction. But hopefully we'll see some improvement there. But the rest of the traffic cams, really, we're just looking at lots of clear skies, lots of sunshine, and some very, very hot temperatures. So let's get started with what we have out there today. And we're still, believe it or not, watching Tropical Storm Debby. The center of circulation has been over water over the last several hours, and it is expected to drift back inland here over parts of South or North Carolina, perhaps sometime later tonight or early tomorrow. And if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the position there at 32.3 north and 79.2 west. But since it's been over water, it's actually strengthened a little bit again. Winds are back up to 60 miles per hour, and that pressure has dropped down to 995 millibars. Again, it is expected to drift inland and should be over land again by early tomorrow morning. And then there's a trough that's digging across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes that will eventually pick up Debby, throw it back out toward the northeast. Still going to be a flood threat, though, for the mid-Atlantic and the northeastern states. And then after that, I think it's going to get swept out, and then we will no longer see a threat to Tropical Storm Debby anywhere there along the North American continent. As far as that rainfall, it's still going to be pretty extreme there over the Carolinas. Anywhere between 6 to 12 inches of rain could still fall. And then, of course, through the Appalachian Mountains, then going up into the New England states, you've got some heavy rains. Again, terrain comes into play a lot with the heavy rains, even though here in Louisiana, 4 to 6 inches of rain doesn't seem like a whole lot. But when you're going into the Appalachians there and you got some of those deeper river valleys, you do have more of a flood threat with lesser rain than what we would see here on the Gulf Coast. And some of the bigger cities are there, at least in a slight to moderate risk of flooding. But you can see there parts of the Carolinas are under a high risk of flooding over the next 3 days. So again, Debby is still going to cause quite a few problems, even though it is just a tropical storm, but should continue to move up the east coast and exit stage right sometime later this weekend. So let's look at what we've got going on locally here on the radar. Just a couple of isolated showers that are out here in the Gulf waters. The nearshore waters are okay. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple of isolated showers maybe develop along the sea breeze here coming up later on in the day, but really I think our rain chances are going to stay in the 10% range. And if anybody's out there boating, or maybe you got a plan on going out there this afternoon, winds and seas aren't going to be too bad. I think we'll see a westerly breeze at about 10 to 15 knots and seas 1 to 2 feet in the nearshore waters and 3 to 4 in the far offshore waters. It gets a little rougher though as you get over in the eastern Gulf and especially over the Atlantic, where we still have tropical storm Debby. But really actually a pretty day over the Gulf of Mexico. A bit of a boundary sparking off from showers and thunderstorms stretching from about Tampa westward to just south of, let's say, Grand Isle. And then we've got a few widely scattered showers and thunderstorms there stretching toward the Texas Gulf Coast. But really, most of the Gulf of Mexico is very, very quiet this time around. Looking down in the Western Caribbean into Central America as well. Let's go there with Central America first. And we've got some moisture and we've got some thunderstorms that are here over the western part of the Caribbean. That's going to continue to go ahead and push off toward the west, and I think it might have a chance for some development perhaps over parts of the Pacific Ocean. But farther out here is where we're watching our tropical wave, and we can see that a little bit better here on the Caribbean satellite. And this is the tropical wave that the National Hurricane Center has been watching over the last couple of days, with the potential for some development as it moves off toward the west. But as we talked about yesterday, most of the computer models are really kind of waving this one off. And now the National Hurricane Center has basically dropped the possibility of development down into the 10% range over the next several days. So at this point, it doesn't look like a tropical wave is going to develop over the Caribbean, but there's several more tropical waves that are out here over the Atlantic Ocean that have a better chance, and we're going to go through some of the models. Some are keeping the Atlantic somewhat sleepy, while some models are really starting to wake up the Atlantic. We're also going to look farther down the road here in today's Let's Talk Tropics. As many people are saying, well, we've only had 4 named storms. We're already to August the 7th. How are we going to make it up to some of these preseason forecasts that are calling for more than 20 named storms? And we're going to look at the named storms that have developed after August 7th over the past several years. And I think you might be surprised at how much activity could still be coming along here over the next several weeks. But as I said, National Hurricane Center also not too turned on by this tropical wave over the Caribbean Sea. They're still giving it a 10% chance if it indeed makes its way into the Bay of Campeche, but I think a lot of this is going to rain itself out over parts of Central America, and then maybe if there's some energy, it might have a better chance once it gets over into the Pacific Ocean. So let's go through our models, and we're going to start with the American model, the GFS, and I'll just go ahead and let this run. This is actually going through August the 16th. I forgot to change the top graphic there, but this is going through Friday, August the 16th, and you can see that there are a few blips here and there, but it isn't really forecasting a whole lot. If we're talking about that tropical wave that's over the Caribbean Sea, this is going out to Sunday. It is showing some moisture here over the Bay of Campeche, but it is not showing any tropical development there. So the GFS has already turned itself off when it comes to anything developing over the Bay of Campeche sometime this weekend. But I do want to fast forward to Friday the 16th. So this is a week from Friday, and you can see there's a bit of a low pressure area here over parts of eastern Cuba. There's a tropical wave that's currently over the middle part of the Atlantic, actually the eastern part of the Atlantic. It's a little bit farther off this chart here, off to the east, but it is going to march its way kind of in this direction, and there are a few models that have some development that will be happening somewhere in this particular area about the same time that the GFS is forecasting a bit of a low pressure area here in about a week and a half or so. So again, we're not looking at anything really shutting down over the next several days, but I will mention that both the GFS, the Euro, and also the Canadian and the Icon model are taking this big ridge of high pressure and shoving it off toward the east as a big trough here kind of digs. Remember, we talked about this little trough yesterday here over the Great Lakes that's eventually going to pull away Tropical Storm Debby, but that trough is also going to kind of stick around out here in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. Boy, this cursor does not want to do anything today, but high pressure is going to be pushing off toward the east. Will it be able to pick up anything that might develop in this area and keep it away from the Gulf of Mexico? Well, the Euro model certainly seems to think so, but the GFS model wants to keep things a little bit farther to the south and maybe edge its way into the Gulf of Mexico. But with this ridge of high pressure pushing east, a lot of the tropical waves that are out here in the Atlantic Ocean should turn away, and hopefully we won't be dealing with anything coming toward the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico over the next several days. As the Euro model, as we go into Sunday, again looking at the tropical wave that's over the Caribbean right now, again it is showing a lot of moisture here, but it isn't showing any tropical development. So the Euro is also waving off the Caribbean wave as well as the National Hurricane Center. But just like the GFS, let's go out a week and a half, and the GFS has a low pressure area here over the western part of the Atlantic. Remember, the GFS had one here. The Euro has it a little bit farther toward the north in response to that ridge of high pressure perhaps moving out of the way. So again, this area here could possibly be looking at some development in about a week and a half. Whether we keep an Atlantic storm or we get a Gulf storm, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. The Canadian model really isn't showing anything, which is kind of surprising because the Canadian model is one of those models that tends to whip up just about any wave that's out there. It is showing some tropical waves that are running across the Atlantic Ocean, but nothing really showing up that looks interesting here between now and the end of next week. So the Icon model doesn't quite go out as far. And again, I think I forgot to change that top graphic. I think it goes through August the 14th now on this one. It's more of a 10-day or a 5 to 6 day deal. So you can see that that ridge of high pressure is also shifting much farther to the east, which would allow more of your tropical systems to probably stay out over the Atlantic Ocean. But I do want you to notice that the icon is showing a number of tropical systems trying to develop, kind of marching across the Atlantic Ocean. And then at least the icon is showing possibly some development similar to what we see with the Euro. But again, that extended Icon model is showing more of a parade of tropical waves that could potentially become tropical systems over the next week to week and a half. So you got one here, here, and maybe another one coming off the Atlantic coast farther down the road. So the Icon is actually keeping things a bit more active. Water temperatures, as we've talked about, are quite high, as well as the deepness of those 80-degree water temperatures. So anything that wants to try to develop, as long as it has pretty low wind shear and some decent atmospheric conditions, I don't think there's going to be a lot to inhibit development when it comes to our water temperatures. But looking at the wind shear, we are looking at fairly light wind shear across parts of the Atlantic Ocean and also much of the Gulf of Mexico. Will this wind shear stay light over the next several weeks? We'll just kind of have to wait and see. And Mr. Mater or Ms. Mater, Mark Mater, yes, I've tried every different mouse. I've tried every different mouse pad. I've tried to put it on paper, cardboard, and everything else. I think I'm just going to have to find a new whiteboard layer to put in there to see if that stupid cursor wants to work. But yeah, it always likes to drop with other things that are on there. But yeah, I've tried just about everything, Mr. Mater, to see if anything would change on that. But thanks for the comment here this morning or this afternoon. Let's real quick, before I let you go here, as I was saying, that we've only had 4 named storms, and to let you know, I think last year we were at this point, we only had 4 named storms as well. But I want to look at the last 5 years and the number of storms that have formed after August 7th, which is today, and kind of give you an idea of what we're probably going to be expecting. You can see over the last 5 years, we've seen anywhere between 11 and 21 storms, but we've been more on the higher end, 15 to 21. Back last year, we had 15 named storms form after today, 6 of those becoming hurricanes. 2022 was kind of the same. We had 8 hurricanes form after today, with 11 of those being the named storms, 16 back in 2021. And I'll tell you what, the last 3 years, we had a pretty good break between the end of June, early July, and then there was kind of this lull like we had this year, and then things really ramped up once we got into August. 2020 was really the only year in the past 5 years where we just had continuous activity from June all the way through the end of November. 2019 also saw quite a break, but we still ended up with 16 named storms after August the 7th. So most likely we are going to see in the teens numbers of named storms, and we could see anywhere between 5 and 12 hurricanes between now and the end of the hurricane season. And that pretty much goes along with what a normal season would look like, where things really start to ramp up about the second half of August. We're about right about in here. Second half of August and going into September, that's when things really start to pick up. So having 10 to 15 named storms between now and the end of the hurricane season really isn't that unrealistic. That's why I keep saying, make sure you plan now. These are, again, things that you can do right now when there's nothing threatening the Acadiana area. You can get those batteries, flashlights, water, non-perishable foods. All of that stuff is available right now out in the grocery stores. And of course, there's no rush happening right now. Once you get that named storm and once people start to realize there's something that could threaten the Acadiana area, that's when things really start to get busy. So you can get out there and grab some of these things, and there'll be just one less thing you'll have to do to prepare later on in the hurricane season. Of course, make sure make sure your first aid kit is stocked up. Make sure you have plenty of personal hygiene items, cleaners for the house, prescription medicines, kind of take inventory of that. Make sure you got enough for the next month or so. And also, if there's a chance that you might have to evacuate, make sure you know where you would get additional refills on your prescription medicine if you have to go to a different place. With all your IDs, insurance, and important papers, you can keep those all together in a watertight container that you can grab and go when you need to, but you can also take pictures of it with your phone, and that'll help you out where you have those as copies of digital. And of course, for home, if you're going to stay home for a tropical storm or hurricane, or evacuate, make sure you got a basic tool set, lots of entertainment for the kids, and everything that you would need for your pets, including the pet medicine, food, bedding, and everything else you would need for your pets. So those are just some things that you can be doing right now where you don't have to worry that there's a big rush out there at the stores, because things do kind of get crazy, especially when you get within 4 or 5 days of a tropical system approaching the area, and then when you started to get in that day 2 or 3 before we're actually in the crosshairs of a tropical storm or hurricane, that's when the panic buying starts, and that's when the grocery stores and everything start to get very, very crowded. So you might be able to save yourself a few headaches if you can grab some of these things right now. So there is a lot of hurricane season to go. And again, we could see a good number of tropical storms and hurricanes before we get to the latter part of October, early part of November, where things usually calm down here along the Gulf Coast. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Tell your friends too. I'm approaching 2,800 subscribers. I'd like to cross that threshold here fairly soon. And again, thank you to everyone that's been watching over the last several weeks as we've gotten this channel going. I've had about 45,000 views on this channel since we kicked this thing off way back in April. So just a little over 100 days. I really appreciate a lot of folks following along and learning something about the tropics as well as your daily forecasts, how we put these forecasts together, how you should be preparing for hurricane season, and what the experts at the National Hurricane Center do and how they put their forecast together and let you know what's coming and how you can get yourself prepared. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay cool. I think we're going to hit 101 later this afternoon. I will see you tomorrow morning on Acadiana Weather Today around 7:30 on Thursday. Bye-bye.